Over 20 million Americans are considered to be bassaholics. They average fishing for the black bass 20 to 100 plus days per year. The black bass is a predator with a small brain with no thought center. Its actions are stimulated by what it hears and sees, responding by instinct, not thought. Its strongest instinct is towards survival and to avoid danger. The memory span of a bass only lasts for 15 minutes, an important factor to remember. A bass is equipped with excellent eyes and has a horizontal below the surface vision of 300 degrees, with its blind spot being a 60-degree area behind its tail. The above-water vision of a bass is limited to a 90-degree cone, and because the water surface acts like a mirror, the vision of a bass is distorted due to surface refraction. Wave action causes refraction, an important factor to remember. A bass sees best straight ahead. This is where it perceives the clearest image. Straight ahead vision, nature's armament for taking prey, evading enemies, and avoiding obstacles. Contrary to popular belief, the internal vision circuitry of the bass's eye contains rods and cones, like the human eye. That means a bass can determine the color of a lure, another important factor to remember. Even though he lies submerged 12 feet deep near a ledge, the bass can hear. His inner ear is well developed and operates much like a human ear. His air bladder plays a large role in his ability to sense sound. It acts like a resonator, a long-range early warning listening device, while also maintaining his neutral buoyancy. This allows him to suspend at any depth he desires. His lateral line is a narrow streak, a black line on each side of his torso. It's a mucus-filled canal that works like radar to warn him of danger and to allow him to sense movement, any kind of movement. It also allows him to be able to strike objects he cannot see, like at night or in very muddy water, another important factor to remember. His environmental needs include oxygen, food, suitable pH in the water, and cover. His main food sources are smaller fish, reptiles, amphibians, insects like perch, shad, snakes, bugs, frogs, and crawfish. A bass will also strike and eat mice, small birds, and ducklings. The host of this videotape is one of America's premier and most successful bass fishermen. His expertise in locating and catching black bass is second to no one. John Fox.
Over 40 years of fishing experience and 17 years in professional fishing experience is in the videotape that you're about to see. You know, whether I'm fishing a professional bass fishing tournament or filming for my TV series, I've got to perform. People at the tournament site, my fellow pros, viewers of my TV show, expect me to perform. So I program myself to try to be able to catch fish anywhere, on any lake, at any time. How, when, and where to catch bass can help make you a better fisherman. However, no videotape, mine or anyone else's, can make you a good fisherman unless you're willing to dedicate yourself and practice, practice, practice.
Spring bass fishing is the one period of the year when lunker bass that usually live in water very deep start to move towards shallow water to spawn. This puts a lunker bass into a vulnerable position to be caught for two reasons. One, they usually go on a feeding binge before spawning. And two, they by instinct fight off predator fish that move in to eat the eggs and small fry. Now, when the surface water warms to 50 degrees, bass that have lived in deep water for the winter will start rising to the surface over deep water, suspending themselves at a depth of 1 to 10 feet. This allows the bass to absorb the warming rays of the sun to start to activate their eggs that started to form in the fall. The bass will rise to the surface in and around structure, which could be trees, rocks, or drop-offs in deep water from 20 to 45 feet, with a close accessibility to shallow water. John Fox has found that these bass will strike a topwater lure, a buzzbait, a spinnerbait, or a shallow running crankbait, or a plastic worm. John uses his LCR Humminbird 4000 series depth finder and fish locator to locate these bass and catch them.
There he goes. Now what we've done here, we've taken the LCR 4000 to locate an area where there is fish. We're assuming, of course, that the fish are holding in these bushes. Let me throw him back. Because they were right out from these bushes. Get this boat out here. But basically what we're going to do now is to come back and fish these bushes in this area where we've located all of the fish on the 4000. Here's some more fish showing up now on the LCR 4000. And what we're going to do is stop that if we can. And you can actually see the fish. In fact, look, I've caught one of them right under the boat. Look here. Hey, I'll guarantee you one thing. It doesn't lie to you. Like I say, this is just something you're going to have. This is the greatest unit I've ever seen.
Another trick that John Fox uses to locate bass is to troll or stroll a Bill Norman deep little N in deep water close to shallow water. Once a bass or two is located using this method, John will move towards shallow water and cast the deep little N towards shallow water and retrieve the deep little N towards deep water. John explains why these two systems should work for you as it does for him.
What we're doing here right now, we're locating fish. And we're using the deep little N, which has got a bill on it about this long. I'll show it to you here in a minute. And we're going to be trolling out from this riprap, trying to find the depth that the fish are in. Also trying to find an area in which the fish are using. One of the best theories that I've ever heard on bass is that they live deep and they'll move up into the shallows to feed. So we're actually trolling out here where they live in about 25 to 30 foot of water. The deep little N will go down about 8 to 12 feet, depending on how much line I have out. And I'm using 14-pound test line here on this Bass Pro Shop rod. It's a graphite gold. It's got a lot of feel to it. Let's move in just a little bit closer. We're going to be just kind of zigzagging in and out, hopefully till we find a pattern that the fish are on. There he is. It'll work every time for finding them. There you go. Boy, I mean, he hit it too. Yes, sir, strolling or trolling is an awfully good bass locator. And a lot of times, it'll help put you on fish in a strange lake. Yes, sirree. Get on back in there, big boy. This is the bait. This is the Norman little N in the crawfish pattern. The reason we're using this here on these rocks, in my opinion, the fish will be feeding on crawfish probably better than any other particular type of food species. So try to match your hatch, so to speak, with a bass and fish something that they should be feeding on, which of course would be the crawfish. Yes, sirree.
Bass that have suspended over deep water in the pre-spawn will many times, if the sun is high or if we have a few warm days in spring, move from the deep water to shallow water to look around and feed. In the interim of time that they're not in shallow water, they'll lay out suspended over the deeper water. I found that they'll come into shallow water on a straight line towards the shallow water. And if you catch 2 or more bass in a small area, there's a very good chance that you can work over and over this area and catch several to many bass. Here's the first pro tip. Make sure that you learn these pro tips. Where you locate bass in the pre-spawn suspended position should result in catching a good number of bass on the shoreline after the surface water reaches 60 degrees throughout the spawn. The bass in situation that I've just described are for bass that spawn on the main lake. However, there are many bass, in fact, more bass, spawn in the coves. Now, these bass suspend also in the pre-spawn, but usually directly over a creek or river that runs under the water towards the back of a cove. These bass can be located in the same manner as main lake spawning bass in the pre-spawn and with the same lures. However, I've found that cove bass migrate over the creek or river that goes back in a cove, kind of like we drive down a street or a road going to home or going to visit a neighbor. Then they move to the bank, get this, at the mouth of the cove first. As the weather starts to warm, they move down the banks to the middle and to the rear of the cove when they get ready to fan their beds in preparations for the spawn. Another pro tip, and this one can really put some bass in your live well or on your stringer. Another pro tip, watch for turtles on the logs within the confines of the cove in springtime. If you observe turtles on the logs, the bass are in the coves.
Springtime, like no other time of the year, is when bass are affected most by cold fronts. Bass will be in shallow water for a few days. A cold front comes through, and they retreat to deeper water. But smart bass fishermen will simply back out into deeper water and catch a few bass when other fishermen say they aren't biting. John Fox explains where and how he catches them.
There are 2 times that I like to position my boat in shallow water and throw out towards the deeper water. One is when I fish from the deep water, throwing towards the bank in the springtime and catch all male bass. You can usually spot a male bass at this time of the year. They are usually much thinner than a roe-laden female, and they'll usually sperm a stream of clear liquid when caught or when you remove the hook. When I start catching all male bass, I immediately position my boat in the shallow water and throw toward the deeper water to try to catch a larger female that's laying out in the deeper water waiting to come into the bank. And a lot of times the male will go out and get her and herd her toward the banks where she can lay her eggs. The other time that I position my boat in shallow water and throw out to the deeper water is when a front comes through. Now, a front makes all bass, male and female, retreat to the deeper water. Now, here's the first special pro tip that I talked to you about. One that really will be worth the price of this videotape. The day after a front passes through, we call them bluebird days. The sky is extremely blue and high. Cast into and work a plastic worm, plastic lizard, or live rubber jig and Uncle Josh pork frog into the deepest water in the cove, especially in the guts of the creek or river under the water in the cove. Then, in this condition of high pressure, a bass will go to the deepest confines of a creek or river to try to equalize the pressure that's affecting their bodies. This is where the bass are, under this high pressure situation. And if you're going to catch one, you must fish like this to catch it. Does it make sense? Vertical fishing works well in this situation. A lot of times, I simply just drop my lure over the side of the boat, and I like to hop it up and down off of the bottom, swim it, tantalizing it down there. By vertical fishing, you can cover more territory effectively than you can by casting. Why? Because you'll keep your lure in contact with the bottom longer where the bass are, for a larger percentage of bass strikes. Now let me show you visually some areas that should hold bass in the spring, during the pre-spawn and during the spawn. Flat banks, preferably with some cover. Trees, down logs, bushes, grass, or willows, with water from 1 to 5 foot deep. Pea gravel, with water from 1 to 5 foot deep. If it's got some scattered stumps in it, it's even better. Rocky banks, with water from 1 to 5 foot deep. Those kinds that you can see some extra scattered rocks in and off of the water, maybe under the water.
Let's cover summer bass fishing. The early part of the summer, when the water surface reaches 70 degrees, is known as the post-spawn. This is a period of time when the bass have spent from 1 week to as long as 2 months in the pre-spawn and the spawn, and have developed a voracious appetite. The male bass especially are extremely active in foraging for food. The female bass, as a human female after childbirth, takes a week or so to recuperate and convalesce. At this time, she does not feed very much, if any. Most professional guides and bass fishermen have a difficult time in locating any appreciable amount of bass in the post-spawn period. The bass seem to vanish. But now, you'll know where to find these bass during this hard-to-locate period, because John Fox is going to divulge to you where they go and where you can find them. This special pro tip, along with John's special pro tips on spring cold front bass fishing, should make you a master bass fisherman. John Fox spent hundreds of hours under the water with scuba equipment to discover the important locations described in these special pro tips, and countless hours fishing for them in those special conditions. Here's John Fox to give you this important piece of information.
After the spawn, bass migrate back to the deep water, deeper than they migrate into the shallow water. I've done a lot of underwater diving with scuba equipment to discover something that should help you in the post-spawn period.
Bass, after the spawn, migrate differently into an area than they migrated before the spawn. I discovered this phenomenon while scuba diving over a period of years. Here's another one of those special pro tips that I told you about. The bass use points like you might play a game of checkers as they move from point to point, working their way towards deeper water after the spawn. I know some top guides, pros, and some awfully good bass fishermen that can't find them after the spawn. Now you know where. Fish the cove points coming out and then the main lake points. This period of time until they finally move to the deeper confines of the lake can last from 1 to 3 months, depending on the temperature of the surface water. Points are ideal fishing in sanctuary areas. They afford a bass shallow water, close to deep water, what every bass requires. Here's another pro tip. Larry Nixon, one of America's top bass fishing professionals, was asked by some sports writers after he won the Classic what he looks for in trying to find catchable bass? His answer? To find shallow water, close to deep water, with an abundance of food, and the bass will be there. Now, this is an important statement, and one that you should remember. It's the same theory that I've used for 40 years of bass fishing. But get this, barometric pressure and feeding cycles are times govern whether you can make a bass strike even though you know he's there. Again, I've spent hundreds of hours under the water. I've observed from 1 to 30 bass in a blowdown or a fallen tree. I've seen not one, but I've seen 10 to 12 boats with bass fishermen in them approach this cover and cast for the bass. Now, they use spinnerbaits, topwaters, crankbaits, plastic worms, to no avail. The bass were not in a feeding period.
I'm going to cover a third and fourth special pro tip that will help make you a master bass fisherman.
When the barometer is low, fish shallow. When the barometer is high, fish deep. If the barometer is high and starts to fall, the bass start to move from deep water to shallow water immediately. When the barometer starts to rise from a low, the bass will move from shallow water to deep water immediately. With a barometer on board my boat or in my tackle box, I've been able to know immediately when to change fishing locations rather than to continue fishing when the bass were biting but quit. Getting back to points. Points are excellent summer bass holding locations as the surface water warms to 72 degrees plus. The bass kind of use the main lake points more than the cove points. The possible exception to this is if a cove has 20 foot to 60 foot plus foot of water depth within the cove. Summer also is an excellent time to use your LCR 4000 Humminbird, as I do, to locate underwater islands, underwater trees, extended underwater points, sand and rock bars, and depressions in the lake bottoms, rock fields, drop-offs, and underwater creeks and river bends. Here's another pro tip. When fishing underwater structure in the summer, whether it's underwater islands, trees, rocks, depressions, drop-off ledges, or what, always favor the shady side, because this is where the bass will be, and they will move around during the day with the sun angle. Lures to use in the summer are a Bill Norman's triple wing buzzbait. Bass will come up from 1 foot to 30 foot to hit this great lure. A Strike King spinnerbait, worked at depths from 1 to 30 feet. Yep, you can work it that deep. Bass love the flash and built-in vibration of this bass-catching wizard. A Bill Lewis rattle trap, worked on points or deep structure. This racket-making, vibrating wonder is the #1 selling crankbait at Bass Pro Shops. And Bass Pro Shops sell more tackle than any other retailer in America. So this tells me, and should tell you, that Bill Lewis rattle trap is a must lure for you. Now, I also fish the Deep Little End and the Deep Big End by Bill Norman in the summer quite a bit. It digs straight down off of a ledge, creek bank, or an underwater hump. It sort of catches a bass by surprise, if you know what I mean, by just suddenly popping into view. Bass are reaction creatures, and they will hit it sometimes without thinking twice. Now, the plastic worm is a solid choice for fishing in the summer. The two color worms, like purple firetail, or purple with a white tail, or electric blue with a white or chartreuse tail, and black with blue tail, are all excellent choices. Solid colors in electric blue, mean green with red flake, or melon green with red flake, grape with red flake, purple with red flake, ice blue, black with red flake, and solid reds are my choices. Here's another special pro tip. A rule of thumb so you can figure the right color is: the darker the time of day, the darker the color you should fish. The lighter the time of day, the lighter the color you should fish. Why? Well, it just makes sense to me that at night, if a bass is going to see anything, he's going to have to look up. You can silhouette black, for example, against a night sky better than you can any other color. Now, keep in mind that a bass's eye is not like a human being. He does not have an eyelid. So as he looks down as the day starts getting bright, a lighter color against the darker bottom will show up better. So here's what I use. In plastic worms, at night, black. Early a.m., the first hour of daylight, use black. Late p.m., the last hour of daylight, use black. After the first hour of daylight until 2 hours before noon, use electric blue. Dark green, grape. From 2 hours before noon until 2 hours after noon, use red. Ice blue, light green and purple, the light colors. Then from 2 hours after noon until 1 hour before dark, use electric blue, dark green, and grape. Now in crankbaits. Again, the 14-day cycle I talked about, use crawfish colors. And at night, use crawfish colors or black for top results. Use crawfish colors for the first hour of daylight and the last hour of daylight. Or maybe a bluegill pattern, some dark-looking pattern, possibly gold or copper. Use chartreuse, lime, gold and copper patterns from 1 hour after daylight until 2 hours before noon, and from 2 hours after noon until 1 hour before dark. In the bright period, 2 hours before noon until 2 hours after noon, use silver and pearl patterns. In spinnerbaits, use the same type of choices. Now, the selection I just described are for sunshiny days. If it's cloudy, dark, or raining on a given day, eliminate your midday colors that I just described and stick to your darker patterns that you used from an hour after daylight until 2 hours before high noon, and from 2 hours after high noon until an hour before dark. Summer can be a bonanza of bass catching for you because the bass school up in bunches. Where you catch one, you should catch several. Here's a pro tip that could help to produce some extra bass from a located school of bass. Bass get color-wise. You may have caught 1 to 10 bass from a school of bass on a particular color in a particular spot. Say electric blue, but the bass quit hitting this color. Change colors. Try grape, red, blue, and so forth. It's resulted in extra bass for me, and it should for you. A lot of times the 2-color combinations I described before are excellent choices after bass have gotten color-wise. Another pro tip. If you've been catching bass in a particular spot and they get slow or stop, as I just described, try a Bill Norman deep little end, or deep big end, or a Bill Lewis rattle trap, or try bouncing a spinnerbait off the bottom. A different lure can add some extra bass for you. It works.
The thermocline is prevalent in most lakes during the summer. Thermocline. It's when the surface water is warm to hot and extends down at a warm to hot temperature to a depth of 10 to 30 feet, where it dramatically drops from 5 to 15 degrees. Bass prefer living just under the break in thermocline, just as we as humans prefer air conditioning in the summertime. In the fall, with northerly winds cooling surface water temperatures, a lake turns over, just as a cook would add ingredients in a mixing bowl and then turn on a mixer to meld all of the ingredients together. During the turning over period, the cool water that is strata layered from 10 to 30-foot depths in the summer comes to the surface, bringing with it underwater debris, pieces of moss, decayed vegetation, and bubbles. The thermocline at this period virtually disappears. However, as mentioned, the cooler thermocline waters that were under the surface come to the surface, and the warmer surface water goes where the cooler thermocline water was. This is important in winter fishing, as you will learn later. Once the cooler waters that have transferred from deep to shallow come to the surface, fall fishing starts. Usually, the surface water magically goes from 80+ degrees to 72 degrees, virtually overnight.
Early fall provides an angler with some extraordinary topwater fishing patterns. Sometimes you might want to use a stick type of topwater, which is one with no propellers or really no type of gurgling mouth. Another is a propeller type of topwater. Then, of course, you have the minnow type and the gurgling type of topwater. All are excellent. Big bass are in shallow foraging for food to fatten themselves up for the winter, that they know they're going to have slim pickings on food. Another excellent bait for the fall is Bill Norman's triple wing buzzbait, either the small one or the big one. Try chartreuse white during the brighter times of day, and chartreuse blue combos, black chartreuse combos, and solid black real early and late. Many fall days, I'll fish a Bill Norman triple wing buzzbait all day long and catch bass all day long. So will you. Vary your retrieves from very slow and just fast enough to keep it on top, to medium and to fast. Many days the bass will want it super slow for an hour and extra fast for 2 hours, then medium for an hour, and so forth. This is strictly a trial and error situation. As it is throughout the year, the fall is an excellent time for Bill Lewis's rattle trap. Fish the rattle trap around standing timber and 2 to 15 foot of water. Fish tree lines, rock bluffs, points, and over on the edges of the moss beds. The rattle trap's an exceptionally good fall crankbait. Now, plastic worms like the Bass Pro Shop Triple Ripple are excellent also. I tend to stick to black blue tail, black chartreuse tail, electric blue, and green in the fall. Now, a deep-billed crankbait like Bill Norman's deep little end is good on outside creek bends, drop-offs, bluffs, and points. Shad patterns are #1 at this time of the year. The spinnerbait is deadly in the fall. I like the big fluted Strike King Willow Spins by Strike King. Try black or orange and black at night, and also early and late. Chartreuse, white, chartreuse white combos are the Strike King triple colors, and chartreuse lime and white or chartreuse white and blue are deadly. Buzz the Strike King around visible cover. Occasionally bring the Strike King up to a bush, tree, log, or rock, and stop. Let the Strike King with its sample ball bearing swivel, rotate in a helicoptering downward action, fall by the bush, tree, log, or rock. Feel the Strike King down as it falls. A slight thump tells you a bass has inhaled it on the fall. If you don't get a strike, try it again and again. I'll assure you the retrieve will result in your catching some good bass in the fall. Fall is a time when the bass tend to migrate up the creeks and rivers and the coves that have creeks and rivers in them. The upper ends of a lake or reservoir will produce lots of bass in the fall. Bass move more in the fall than in the spring or summer. They're more active in the fall because they're searching for food to put on that extra layer of fat, so to speak, to survive the usually lean eating conditions of winter. Now, the bass prefer to move up creeks and rivers. Consequently, I like to fish the bends in a creek or a river more than any area in the fall. Here's another pro tip for you. When fishing a bend in an underwater creek or river in the fall, fish your lure down the drop-off. Do the same thing in the winter. Only in the summer do you work a lure from deep water to shallow on a drop-off. Now, winter fishing for bass can be very rewarding if you're willing to brave the cold temperatures. The same amount of bass that were there in the spring and summer and fall are there in the winter. Really, I think they're a little easier to catch. You know why? They bunch up better. If you're fishing a creek or a river, a drop-off ledge, or wherever pattern you happen to find them on, usually if you catch one or two bass, you'll catch lots of bass. In the winter, I'll do more vertical fishing than I will casting. The bass seem to want to get on the bottom. They're looking for shad, for example, that are maybe dying from the cold temperatures, and they're dropping to the bottom. So they tend to really get on the bottom and feed more. So you can take a spoon like a Hopkins type or a Topo type and drop it straight off the boat to the bottom, jig it up and down, maybe in a motion like this, letting it fall. Make sure you feel the spoon down, because most of the time as it's falling, you'll feel just a slight thump. When you do, set the hook. Again, when you catch one, maybe two, you know there's a lot of fish in that area. Throw you a marker buoy out where you can stay in that area. A pattern that I've found real good in the winter is to find like a point in a cove coming out and another point coming out here. And I'll take my 4,000 LCR Humminbird and I'll run from that point to this point and find the very deepest water. And I'll drop a buoy on it. Then I'll move in the cove maybe 100 yards in the deepest part again and drop another buoy. Then I'll go out of the cove maybe 100 yards and find the deepest water and drop me another one. Somewhere in that 200-yard stretch, for some reason, and it's worked year after year for me, bass seem to hold up in that deep water. And they'll pay off for you too if you'll try it. If you use a temperature probe, you'll discover that the water in the 20 to 60 foot depth range is warmer than the surface water. And the warmer water temperature will hold more bass. Use your LCR 4000 Humminbird to locate schools of bass in underwater creeks and rivers, high spots off the creeks and rivers, and sheer drops. These areas will produce winter bass. Now, the live rubber jig and Uncle Josh pork frog work vertically will trick a lot of winter bass too. Try black and black. That is a black jig with a black Uncle Josh #1 or Big Daddy pork frog. Or black blue with a black pork chunk or a blue pork chunk. Black and green jigs with a black pork chunk or green pork chunk. Black and brown jigs with black or brown pork. And if you've got real clear water, try brown on brown. Use a 1/2 ounce to a 3/4 ounce weighted jig for vertical fishing. Here's another pro tip on fishing the spoon. A trick that I use in fishing it vertically off the bottom is to bounce it up and down. Then pick it up and hold it about 1 foot or 2 off the bottom. The spoon, when stopped abruptly, will rotate round and round like a spinnerbait blade turning. A big bass will swim up to the rotating spoon, suck it in, and swim off with it. Many times when the bass does suck it in, you'll not feel anything. All you'll feel is the rod going down. When that happens, hit him hard.
John Fox has covered bass fishing in the 4 seasons of the year: spring, summer, fall, and winter. The fish locating tips, bass catching techniques, lure selection, and lure colors he has recommended, when practiced and mastered, will make you a master bass fisherman. And now, John Fox is going to show you how he fishes different lures, how he adds that little extra action, that special fine-tuning of a lure. Watch and listen.
I'm going to talk to you now about rigging and fishing the plastic worm. There's no question about it, and Loren Hill, the bassin professor at the University of Oklahoma, agrees. For some reason, a bass only has a memory cycle of about 10 minutes. But for some reason, you can keep throwing worms at them, and it looks like for some reason, the worm just does not pose any kind of a danger threat to them. First of all, you want to match the size of the hook with your worm. Naturally, this hook here is too big for a little 4-inch worm. It's a 5/0 hook. In this particular worm, you'd want to use a 1/0 hook. But just for demonstration purposes, because the hook is bigger, I'm going to use the bigger hook. But where you can make a mental note of it, you want to use a 1/0 hook in a 4-inch worm, you want to use a 2/0 hook in a 5-inch worm, a 3/0 hook in a 6-inch worm, a 4/0 hook in a 7-inch worm, and a 5/0 hook in a 9-inch worm or in the plastic lizard. Now, in rigging the worms, this is a 4-inch worm, again with a 5/0 hook to where you can see it properly. But you want to start the hook directly in the middle of the nose of the worm and run the hook in about a 1/2 inch. Then bring the hook out. Now keep in mind your line will be tied on here and your slip sinker up and down here. Turn the hook around before pulling the eye in it, where it will line up better. Bring it on in and bring the eye of the hook and your line into the worm. Now, Texas rig, which I helped develop several years ago, you strictly just stick the point of that hook into the worm like this, and it keeps it weedless. Now, when you set the hook, what happens is that this comes through the worm like this and catches the bass. But I'm going to show you a trick right now that will result in you catching more bass with the plastic worm rigged similar to this than any other method that you've ever tried. It's another special pro tip, so make sure you watch this close. After you have run your line and the eye of the hook down into the worm like I've done here, take the hook and run it completely through the worm, just like this. It's completely through the worm. Then you want to hold the worm against the hook like this. Bring the worm forward and pinch it just over the point of the hook. It's still weedless, but all it takes to set the hook is a slight amount of pressure. Bingo, it's in the bass's mouth. So many times if you fish light line, which I prefer to fish if you have open cover, 8 to 10 pound test. If you're going to fish around grass where a bass could take you into it or brush, then you'd want to go to 10 to 14 pound test. If you're fishing extremely bad, tight, thick cover, then of course 17 to 25 pounds. But let me tell you something about that. You'll get 5 or 10 times more strikes with 8 to 10 pound line than you will with 20 to 25. And that's by actual test. You want to learn where to throw your plastic worm. For example, if the bass are shallow, you want to throw toward visible cover. For example, a bush, a down log, a rock you can see in the water. Naturally, if they're deep and you've discovered that they're deep, then of course you want to throw it out and work the worm up the drop-off, especially in the summertime when you're going to be fishing the plastic worm more than any other time. As we've already covered, in the spring, fall, and winter, you want to let the worm, if you fish it, come down the drop-off. It'll work better for you. Now, make your cast out toward the visible cover. Try to throw about 4 or 5 foot the other side of it if you can, to where the worm will hit the bottom, to where you can be working it as it comes by the bush. All right? Something that I want to cover for you now, and I want you to watch this video, and that's flipping the worm. Flipping can be a dynamite way of fishing for a big bass because you actually surprise him. He'll be laying there in the shade, resting all cool, really not expecting anything to come by him. All of a sudden, there's no splash, there's nothing. The worm suddenly just drops right there before him, and it jumps up and down. Now keep in mind, after a bass gets big, he's seen all kind of worms come by him this way, and people work them like this. But he hasn't seen this very much, where that worm's jumping up and down in front of him like this, kind of like it's had a heart attack or it's crippled and it's jumping up and down. I don't care whether he's hungry or not. He'll hit the worm if it's just to kill it. How would you feel if you went home, say you're in your bedroom, and you turn the covers down, and you get in the bed, all of a sudden you feel something jumping around in the bed. First thing you're going to do is throw the covers off of it. Now, if it's a plastic worm, and it's jumping up and down, or a tarantula, whatever it happens to be, the first thing you're going to do is get something and kill it. The same thing the bass does. He may be full, may not want anything to eat, but if that worm jumps up and down in front of him, like we do flipping, he can't stand it, and he will hit it. I'm going to give you a tip on tuning the spinnerbait that'll produce more fish for you, possibly than someone that you're fishing in the same boat with, or other fishermen that are going down the same area throwing a spinnerbait when the fish are really on a spinnerbait. This is a big fluted blade here by Strike King with the shoulders on it that you've heard me talk about in the tape. But inside of that, on their tandem, is another blade. Now, this could be this size blade and maybe different than a willow leaf here. Could be a Colorado or Indiana. But on your inside blade, right here, I'm going to hold this in my hand, and notice now that the cup part is down. This is the part that's up. You want to take a pair of pliers, grab it on the end, about 1/4 of an inch in from where it's made by the manufacturer, and you want to bend that blade up into this position here. Now notice the little cup that I put in it. It's actually bent the opposite from the way the manufacturer recommends it. This will pick more water up than the conventional blade. It changes the pitch. It changes the tune. It makes a different spinnerbait than one that you've ever fished right out of the package. So many fishermen fish one right out of the package and don't do anything to tune it. Just by taking your pliers and pushing it up right here, this little push-up place right here will pick up more water, and it'll result in catching you more fish. I guess as far as lures are concerned that I probably fish a spinnerbait in professional tournaments more than any other lure. I mean, just to be honestly and basic with you. I like the rattle trap. I fish it a lot. I use a lot of Bill Norman's crankbaits, and I use a plastic worm and the jigging pig. But the spinnerbait, I guess, is my favorite lure. Now, there's several ways to work it. The reason the spinnerbait is so versatile, there was a survey taken from the top pros, and they asked the 20 top fishermen what bait that they preferred if they could only have one bait to take anywhere on any strange lake. They don't even know where they're going to fish. What would it be? Believe it or not, 19 out of 20 said the spinnerbait. It's a very versatile bait. You can buzz it on top, or you can work it 5 foot deep. You can work it 15 foot deep, or if you want to, you can bounce it off the bottom in 40 to 50 foot of water, and it will get results from you. The buzz bait is another bait that I like to fish. It's an exciting bait. The main thing you want to try to do is keep it as close to cover as possible, and where possible, try to bring it right through the cover. For example, a bush. Don't throw the buzz bait by the bush, bring the buzz bait right through the bush. A lot of times it'll result in the whole bush turning over as an old big one will come out to get it. Maybe he won't move to the side to get it, but boy, he'll come up and get it. Watch this.
Now we're buzzing them. You know, the buzz craze was started on the American Angler Show last year. We used the lunker lure and we held it out the window of cars, and I know a lot of you bass fishermen tuned them, squealing them, going down the roads, getting them right. And Charles got together and put together a bait that, right as it comes out of the package, will do it all, as you'll see here as the bass get introduced to it. I'll watch it coming through the water here. Some underwater shots of it. Wow, look at that.
I couldn't believe you missed him.
Well, Charles, you know that'll happen.
Did you see that?
I guarantee you. Well, it's a bass on the bed. Of course, you can see the white spot there where he's fanned it out. This was an awfully big fish, too. But the bass were bedding, and every white spot we saw that we threw this bait over resulted in a strike.
I only fish topwater baits when I have to. I know it's an exciting way to catch bass, and I love to see one come up and get it. But being a professional angler, you'll see me fishing either the rattle trap, the normal little N, a worm, or the Strike King spinnerbait or a buzz bait more than anything else. The reason so, I catch more fish. I can cover more territory with it. And when you're making 3,000 plus casts a day, which we do in professional tournaments, then you've got to fish something that moves fast. And it takes a lot of water to catch a lot of bass. The top water is a good bait. I'm going to show you now the minnow type of bait here. Now watch as we start fishing a propeller type of top water. Yep, a top water can be exciting fishing. If that's what you like, then naturally, of course, we hope that we've helped you here on Top Water Fishing.
As John Fox has explained, lure presentation is most important. Here's some ideas from John on how to practice casting and flipping at home.
You know, nothing can ruin a fishing trip anymore if you're not an efficient caster. Your fishing partner's going to be mad at you, and you're going to be mad at yourself if you're constantly getting hung up in the bushes or getting backlashes, or you're really not going to catch the fish if you don't place the lure in the right place. I've always said this, and I'm going to make it an intricate part of this tape, that you should learn to practice in your backyard. It's so simple. Of course, a boat like this, some of the modern boats all have the big high seats in the front and the high seats in the back. So what I've done is simply take a chair out of the dining room that sits about like the chair in the boat. Now, another trick that I'm going to give you is, rather than use a practice plug, use the lure that you're planning on fishing. A spinnerbait, for example. It'll throw different than a practice plug. The wind catches this blade, and it'll actually throw off a target. Take your pair of pliers and turn the hook around like I've done on this one. If you're going to be using a crankbait or want to practice a crankbait, take your pair of pliers and cut all the barbs off of the hook. But learn to cast with that crankbait. Take your worm, slip sinker, and a hook. Cut the end of the hook off. Just stick the blunt end of the hook up in the worm and learn to cast with that worm. Now, for targets in the backyard, everybody's got a bunch of magazines in the house. They make a great target. In fact, if you're going to be a good fisherman, you really need to figure that you can hit a target about the size of a magazine. So I'm going to place these now at different intervals, 15 foot, 20 foot, and say 10 foot, just to kind of give you an idea. Then we're going to sit in the chair and we're going to cast to them. And I'm going to show you a little trick on casting that just might help you out. Now, we've placed the magazines out in the yard. Before I sit down, I want to show you a little trick, and that is something that all athletes take advantage of, and that's the fact that the wrist is hinged this way rather than this way. In other words, you have more wrist movement this way than you have this way. I want to show you something about casting that can help you. Number one, I see so many people grab the rod and reel and they cast like this. And I know you've seen them and might even do it yourself. They use the whole arm casting. That's because they're having their wrist up. If you'll take and turn your wrist sideways with the handle up, push your button, it's strictly wrist movement. Watch this. There's your cast. You don't use anything but your wrist. Show you one more time. Again, don't cast like this. This will wear you out in a day's time. Simply turn the rod and reel over this way with the handle up, your wrist this way, with your elbow at your side like this. Then in one movement with your wrist up, down. Here it goes. And you'll make a cast. Then back in this hand. Left-handed casting is the same principle. You strictly turn the rod and reel over, but your handle, of course, would be down. It would be just the opposite. And with one wrist movement, right out in the lake. We're going to show you some underwater casting, of course, on our videotape during our on-the-water demonstration. But right now, we're trying to show you how to learn the cast in the backyard. So we're going to sit down, and we're going to take the first target first, which is the 10-foot target. And again, with the elbow at the bottom, right here at your side, with your wrist up and the handle up, if you're right-handed, with just a flick of the wrist, right into the book. Here's your next target. Keep in mind the wind, and I purposely got here in the backyard. You can see the wind, so you have to allow a little bit for windage. With the handle up, with your wrist only, with your elbow at your side, flip, and then in. The next target, being out there about 15 feet, keep in mind the wind's blowing a little bit. We want to allow just a little bit to the right for windage, but this way you're looking right down your rod. You got it right in your view, right here, and then right to the next one. Let me suggest that you get the GCY 663 model of the Exelon graphite for your flipping stick. This is one of the finest flipping sticks that I've ever used. I like it because it's collapsible, will store into your rod box or into a carrying case, yet it extends out for easy use. I'm going to be using the jig, which I've cut the hook off of for practicing and flipping, and I'm also going to get one of my wife's mixing bowls. It's very simple. You should be able, if you're going to be a good flipper, to at least be able to hit something as big as a mixing bowl. So many of the pros and myself practice with a quart jar. So it'll give you an idea. We try to hit a 4-inch circle, but if you can hit yourself a 10-inch circle, you should be able to score flipping. And this is the way to start practicing, then go to your smaller objects. Since flipping is done very, very close to the boat in most instances, we're going to place this pretty close out here. Most of the targets that you're going to flip to are no more than a rod tip away. Occasionally we'll flip further, but you should learn to flip here first. And you're going to say, well, that's simple, and it is, but learn strictly to drop that jig in, and when you do, let it hit very soft. This is to practice a very soft retrieve. Up and down, here and in. I'd like to say a special God bless to each and every one of you, and I hope that you will enjoy God's great outdoors as I do so many days each year. You know, it's time, I guess, to kind of wrap this tape up, and I hope that we've helped your fishing. But there's some people that I'd like to thank and dedicate this tape to, because without them, I probably wouldn't be here today. One is my wife, Ruby. Without her patience, I wouldn't have been the fisherman that I am today. The nights that I spent away from home pursuing the black bass, allowing me to go to all the tournaments to become the angler that I am. And I'd also like to thank the rest of my family, all of my kids who also put up with growing up really without a daddy, because I was on the road so much fishing and hunting that I never really had time to grow up with them because I had to pursue a career. I'd also like to thank the people that I work with, my production crew, Darrell Haynes, Mark Pettit, and I'd also like to thank Joe Wolf, Julie Nye, John Tillery, who all work in our office at Fox Wolf Productions and Video in Oklahoma City. Without these people backing you up, it wouldn't have been as successful. And again, to all of the manufacturers who thought enough of me to say, do it. I told them we'd have the very finest videotape on the market. I hope that we fill that void. Hey, I gotta go fishing. Sometime right, maybe we can share the back seat together. Our address is on the videotape. We like to hear from all of you what you think about our tape. Many thanks.